Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of Topic in English. Today we have the team here. We have the journalist, the famous journalist, Halef Kurt. We have Berk Ömer Erçika here, and we also have Erdem Soyer. We have a very special guest today. We have Plan C, the Instagram page here, the main admin, Tim Hakkı, actually the only admin one. You've probably read Tim's articles on Instagram. You definitely have seen him before. He's a very prominent Instagram page. He's a pro-federalist individual with fascinating insights. Yes, today's topic will start with the elections upcoming on the south side. How it will affect the Cyprus problem, how it will affect the island. Tim, you want to start out? You live in the south, you see the atmosphere, you read, you breathe.
So, a lot of people are concerned about the elections, particularly when we look at recent polls. Elam, far-right party, who are not in favor of a solution, have essentially become the second party. DC has been reduced in power so much that they're joint first with Akel now. I mean, this is only according to one poll, but even so, it's a worrying development. So I think the polls in the south are going to be a kind of litmus test for the island to see how the Greek Cypriot public is feeling. Fortunately, the two biggest parties, DC and Akel, are still pro-solution. So I don't know, but with regards to whether the parliamentary elections will affect the Cyprus problem process, I think there's a fear that if Elam take too much power, then they can disseminate anti-solution information in the south. But largely what I've noticed is, I mean, it's the president of Cyprus and the foreign minister who are responsible for the Cyprus problem. And Nikos Christodoulidis and his foreign minister, Kombos, have done a good job of isolating themselves from party pressures and working on the Cyprus problem independently. So the rise of Elam would fundamentally be a worrying development, yes. But I think its effects on the Cyprus problem are limited, basically. So we'll just have to wait and see the results. And yeah, hopefully, you know, the South stays pro-solution in general.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like we're about a month away from the elections, and as we see the trend in the rest of Western Europe, the trend seems to be going towards an anti-establishment vote, with the far right increasing. I feel like as by the way, guys, we are re-recording this video because we lost our first attempt, so we might. I think the first couple of minutes here will be just all four of us, all five of us here, just recounting our points and getting refreshed. Anyways, so I think with the rise of far rights in the rest of Europe and the rise of the anti-establishment vote, it looks like DC and Akel are, as Tim mentioned, they're going to get fractured, especially DC now, since they were in the government. According to the polls, I feel like Elam is hovering around the third or even potentially a second place, which is very scary. We have a lot of divergency from DC, which is the main center-right party. We have another centrist party coming up called Alma. It is looking a bit interesting how the prospects of that will affect the Cyprus problem, but I think the parliamentary results will probably just reflect the internal affairs and how it's going in the Republic of Cyprus. At least that's what I would think.
Yeah, I feel like the parliament elections upcoming in the south is a little bit of a mini referendum towards the Cyprus problem and towards the general atmosphere of the island, because how Nikos Christodoulidis took his government towards a more pro-Israel, more pro-United States stance, and his handling of the regional conflicts. Right now, like, that's the referendum. It's not about really the Cyprus problem. It's not really about economics. It's more about, okay, is this the way you want to proceed for the next couple of years until Nikos Christos goes away? And there are stances that are more anti-Israel or Israel skeptical, like Akel, and there are new players in the game, wild cards, I would like to say. You have Fides Direct Democracy, which today, recording this, had a little mini scandal on the applications that they use. You have Alma. I think another scandal came with Turkish Cypriot community. Alma is campaigning on UK in UK. We have a few more small left alliance with Akel. I believe Volt is still in the game, and Volt is looking a little bit too ambitious and wanting to get a few seats from it. I just wanted to dump this information because it's going to be a very fun and interesting election.
A bit about the calculations that Nikos has to make, what he wants out of these elections.
By the way, I'm just interrupting, but there are also going to be people from Turkish Cypriot community who don't know what these elections is going to be like. How can I say, how it's going to be affecting the presidential palace? If you can also give a little bit of information about how it's going to affect Nikos, and as you said, what's the calculations going to be behind it? It's going to be perfect.
Yeah, well, so unlike the North, the South is an executive presidency. So the president's only job is not just Cyprus problem and foreign policy, it's to run the whole country. And Nikos, when he came into power, he had a broad centrist coalition. His biggest allies were Dikol and EDEK, two I would say they're center-right parties, although EDEK does have its origins in center-left. So he came into power with them, but they've now suddenly become unpopular. Meanwhile, Elam is rising hard, as we previously mentioned. And a lot of that rise comes down to the fact that people are defecting from DC to Elam, notably the former mayor of Strovolos, and I think a former vice president of DC as well has now joined Elam. And this is reflected across the voter base as well. The voters are joining Elam from DC. So what we're seeing now is Nikos and Anita, who I regard as moderates, although, various journalists might say otherwise. They're putting on a big display of Greek nationalism now to try and draw voters away from Elam and back to the conventional right, DC. And so what I think the best possible outcome for Nikos Christodoulidis right now, he wants DC to be weak enough that he can invite them into his government and he can say goodbye to his Dikol and EDEK ministers. DC have said, we're not coming into a Nikos Christodoulidis government. Absolutely not. They consider themselves part of the opposition to him, actually. Even though he came from DC, he's technically an independent president. And DC considers themselves as his opposition. So they've categorically ruled out the possibility of joining a Christodoulidis government. But if they get poor enough election results, then I think he's probably calculating that he'll be able to offer them a ministry or two, bring them into his government. And in that way, he can take voters for the 2028 DC voters. He can steal DC voters for the 2028 presidential elections. So what he really wants is he wants a DC that's weak enough to accept ministries from him so he can bring them into the government, but he doesn't want DC to be so weak that Elam are the new spokesmen of the right, spokespeople of the right. So it's very Game of Thrones down here. And it's, I'm sure it's the same in the North, but, I can't comment much on that.
Just want to add a piece of information that I learned about Republic of Cyprus, that in the EU, among the EU countries, Republic of Cyprus has the biggest amount of deportations for the immigrants, I think. And I was thinking, how much more deportations or something like this should have happened, or like more rejections of visas should happen, like what people actually want, like why are they shifting to right? That's what I was trying to figure out. What do you guys think on that?
Well, I think the movement to the right is largely, I wouldn't say it's anti-Turkish, or I wouldn't say it's specifically anti-Turkish. I'd say that there are anti-Turkish elements to it. Typically, what we've noticed in Cyprus is that whenever the dialogue opens, we get more extreme things going on both sides to try and derail the peace process. So yeah, I think, you know, this far right, I mean, when you walk around urban areas in the south of Cyprus, you do see a lot of migrants. And, you know, talking to Greek Cypriot neighbors, whether they're from the left or the right, it's a common concern amongst them. So I think, you know, it's complicated. There are many shades to the rise of the far right in the south.
I think I'm gonna step in here and kind of agree, but also disagree on the 2 points. The immigration point is, I agree 100%. I think on the south, immigration is massive because I think EU is also, Republic of Cyprus is also one of the highest immigration welcoming countries ever, and it's one of the highest affected due to population sizes being small, very close to the region, also being the hub there, and people are very, very, very afraid of this, and they can see this in their daily lives. Of course, they're going to be far right. There's another point here that I disagree with him, is that it's not, he said that it's fundamentally not anti-Turkish. That's not really true for Elam and other EOKA variations. It's that there's a big regional, and I'll segue to geopolitics, Israel, that Israel is supporting the far right, telling them that we are the cure to Turkey, the Turkish occupation, etc. And unfortunately, amongst the youth at least, I've seen that people are falling to this trap. It's a trap of, okay, let's collaborate with Israel, and this is a trap that Nikos Christodoulis himself constantly falls for, is that Israel will somehow solve the Turkish occupation for them. I don't know if you agree with this, Tim, or not, so I would like to see your opinion.
So Israel is a very controversial topic in the South for obvious reasons. And I think actually when you go around and you ask people, even Elam voters cannot stand Israelis. And I have heard in the pub, you know, I've sat with right-wing Greek Cypriots, quite, you know, some of them read quite far-right news, and they've told me how much they hate Israelis. So, you know, I think there's elements of what you're saying is correct, and I think it is true broadly. I mean, when we look at statements from DC, for example, they're so pro-Israel, like I just don't get it. But when we're talking about the common voter, you know, I'm not too sure. And I think Nikos Christodoulis is not actively seeking the Israeli alliance as a deterrent to Turkish occupation. He's actively seeking an American alliance as a deterrent to the Turkish occupation. And unfortunately, we know that in this region, if you want to be friends with America, you have to bend over backwards for Israel. So that's, you know, that's kind of what I'm seeing. You know, I'd say, you know, the points you made are correct, but, you know, there's always a bigger picture.
I think it's a great check that you mentioned that Christodoulis is trying to make an alliance and is already making alliance with US. And this somehow makes me to question about Cyprus issue more, because I think it was yesterday, there was a bilateral agreement between Cyprus and France, the SOFA agreement. And I think we learned that the French, how can I say, the military is going to be more active on the Cyprus. As well as what we see from the agreements between US and Cyprus back again, we saw that the military actions is going to be, again, is going to be more active. And in previous video, I was mentioning the Israel role in Cyprus, where if there was a federation, I'm talking on assumes, if there will be a federation, the Turkish Cypriot participation or the veto power could be one of the barricades in order to make what this alliance in the West, like it's going to be a blockade for them. So when I'm looking the Cyprus problem, the bilateral agreements between France and Cyprus, the bilateral agreements between US and Cyprus, when I'm also saying Cyprus, I mean the South Cyprus, it makes me to feel like these countries do not support any kind of a federation or any kind of a solution. Because in the current regime, on the current international relations, it's a huge advantage for them in order to use the current status quo for the Southern Cyprus in order to get their most advantage. I'm also curious about your opinion on this one in order to understand what's really happening for also the international actors as well. Because as a final conclusion, in the previous video and also in shorts, we mentioned that any kind of a solution which is going to bring a political equality, so the Turkish Cypriots in the, how can I say, power mechanism, it will create a blockade or maybe slow the progress for this kind of power balancing. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And I think people who do look at this Israeli alliance or American alliance or whatever have very valid concerns. I think the Greek Cypriot government is playing with fire. But I think there is a logic to their actions, and the whole purpose of bringing America on board. I mean, Nikos Christodoulidis was the first South Cypriot president to visit the White House in history, and it was a very big thing. And we know that the reason the Americans are upgrading the airbase in Paphos, the reason why the Americans are training the National Guard, was a direct outcome of this visit to the White House. And at the White House, Christodoulidis proposed to Biden at the time, we will join, Cyprus can be a member of NATO after a solution. That was the proposal. So basically, essentially, he wants American help to get to a solution, and then after, Cyprus can be a part of NATO. Now, you know, people are asking themselves, how would that work? Because when you look at all the solution proposals, Cyprus, all the military forces, both north and south, will be completely demilitarized. So how can Cyprus join NATO without an army? Now, there's one example of this in the world. There's Iceland. Iceland doesn't have an army, but it's a member of NATO. So you don't need an army to join NATO, but essentially what would happen is your land, your territory would become a hub for NATO activity. And so we think basically that NATO could have some form of role to play in a future security guarantee system on the island. But then, as Halef rightly said, Turkish Cypriots will most likely veto any involvement between Cyprus, United Cyprus and Israel, unless Turkey normalizes relations with Israel. And that's the key thing here. And we see evidence that the Americans want the Turks and the Israelis to work together. In summer last year in Syria, there was a military cooperation agreement. Erdogan announced a trade ban on the Israelis. But if you look, Israel is still one of the top 10 trading partners of Turkey, even after the trade ban. So Israel and Turkey's interests are intimately entwined, no matter what the Turkish officials say. And this is all via America. So the situation is complicated, but I think that there is a pro-unification logic to the Greek Cypriot government's actions.
Brought up a very valuable point on what the future might look like, especially in the next half a decade or something. We are obviously in a very troubled part of the world, especially Eastern Mediterranean, with the genocide going on, with so many issues in front of us. The Cyprus problem will have to change out of necessity because of our turbulent geography, and I think we are focusing quite a lot from a macro lens. And I think I want to, for a moment, come back to a micro level, because in our last episode, which was in Turkish, we talked about how the two community leaders, Tufan Evruman and Nikos Christodoulidis, couldn't even in Tufan's first 6 months couldn't even agree on a basic checkpoint. I do want to get into the topic of Israel's influence and Turkey and all that, but I think before getting into a wide geopolitics debate, I want to first come back to a more micro level discussion on Cyprus. And since we started on the election, Christodoulis has around, I think, 2 years left in his election until the next election cycle. This next parliamentary election will most certainly have to influence his last 2 years. Will he try to grapple more into power and soften up to the far right? Will he? And I think obviously his strategic in quotation, his strategic agreements with Israel is very much tied to his popularity. His popularity has decreased significantly. Just wanted to bring the conversation down to a more micro level first before we jump into a full-on macro level geopolitical discussion. And I'm wondering what you guys think about now with the two leaders. And Tim, I think Tim would agree with me here. We have been, I think every couple of months we're like, okay, maybe 2 more months. Okay, and then it's a new year. Okay, it's going to be in the summer. And I feel like this is a trend that we Cypriots are so used to at this point that I feel like change in the next couple of years. But at the same time, these might just be famous last words that we Cypriots always say about the Cyprus problem. So my question to you guys is, what do you think about two leaders and how they will approach this topic before we get into external actors?
Start off. I want to just comment on the fact that we all have the same thing. That's like, this month the meeting will happen this month. The leaders are going to meet this month. I remember back in I think it was on December, I was talking with a bunch of people and we were like, okay, after 1st of January, I think Tim was in that boat as well. After 1st of January, we're going to have a bunch of meetings, like rapid fire. No, nothing like that. I also had what was it? Like when Republic of Cyprus becomes the head of Europe or European Council, European rotational presidency, we're going to have more rapid fire meetings, etc. None of that happened. Complete disappointment. Stagnation all around the Cyprus problem. And it's something that we're used to with Ersin Tatar for 5 years. But it's really disappointing to see this under Tufan Erzuman and also Christodoulis. We also did see, or we are quite seeing a little bit more glimpse of Nikos Christodoulis cozying up to a little bit more right wing. Previously under Ersin Tatar, he didn't seem to be, at least on social media and his media presence, publications, to be surrounded by so many Greek flags, so many Greek Remembrance Day, etc., or EOKA Remembrance Day. But after Tufan Erzuman won and him getting close to the elections, he kind of increased his propaganda machine on that. At least this is just my personal perspective. I don't know what you think, Tim.
Well, I mean, he has always been rubbing shoulders with the far right. And actually the reason why... So before he was elected, I was very scared of him. He seemed like the worst possible option. In hindsight, I think probably Mavroyiannis was. I'm not going to go into reasons why, but I'll tell you why I was scared of Christodoulis, because he was rubbing shoulders with Greek nationalists. At the time, before his elections, he asked for support from a woman called Eleni Theokaros. She is pro-Enosis. She was head at the time of Solidarity Party, which, again, pro-Enosis vehicle. And she said she will set herself on fire in Syntagma Square for Enosis. And I saw her supporting Christodoulis' campaign. And I thought, there is no way that that's a good option. But immediately, so basically the rumors were that she was supporting him because he would give her a ministry. And then when he got elected, he didn't give her a ministry. She quit politics entirely. Solidarity Party no longer exists anymore. So effectively, he killed off an Enosis party by betraying them. And when you saw his election rally, actually, when you look at DC election celebrations, it's all Greek flags. There's no Cypriot flags. But when I saw Nikos Christodoulis' election celebration, there were Greek and Cypriot flags. He got elected saying that he was going to be a leader for all Cypriots. And again, I think Greek nationalism is a game they play in the South because for some reason it gets the populist vote. But I'm not necessarily convinced that the politicians are sincere about their Greek nationalism. I think, like Islamism in Turkey, it's a vehicle to get the populist vote. And it's a vehicle that they can manipulate. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard. He's hard to read. I'll give you guys that. Nikos Christodoulidis is hard to read.
It's funny you mentioned the rhetoric because, I mean, it made me think of when I think of Nikos Christodoulidis, I think of him as a he has a liberal Democrat center right background, I would say, where he his approach is probably not historically rooted in nationalism, but more liberal economics. Halef will probably talk more if he's more familiar with this topic, but I think that's how I would classify him as a politician. And obviously, because of that, he would probably use Greek nationalism as a tool to, as you said, as a populist vote, as a package to be more attractive to some voters. With that, I do think that, as I previously mentioned, with the rise of the far right and this rhetoric being sold in packages of, obviously, Elam has this package of, okay, anti-Turkish, anti-Islam, anti-Turkey, anti a lot of stuff. They're like the anti-party. They love being anti. And it's obviously a very easy package to sell. And I think with, obviously, anti-immigration is a big point of that. I don't know if Christodoulidis would historically have those values, because I think he, as we know, he is a diplomat, and he would, as you said to me, I think he would. The balance here is that will he cozy up to the far right in expense of not solving the Cyprus problem, but grappling onto his seat for a couple more years, or he knows that he has to give up stuff to Turkey at some point in negotiations. He said that publicly before in the interview with. What was it called, Doruk? This is Politics? That interview with two English...
yeah, This is Politics, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, and this is a very much professional diplomatic approach. And I think the interesting thing here is that, I mean, the Greek nationalism has been on the rise for a while. And I think what is scary is that it is in this very convenient package where it is full of these antis, like anti all kinds of things. So, and I think that package is enough to derail the Cyprus problem. I think it is enough of a factor. But the thing with Christodoulidis here is that he has a different background in how he rooted his politics before coming here, and that might be a certain, I don't know, potential change in the future on how he handles the Cyprus problem or internal affairs, or how he will balance the two things. Yes, Berk.
Okay, I just want to stay on the south of the green line, and I just want to kind of change the topic to ask you this, because I'm really wondering. As you know, very recently we had this, I think, EU leaders summit in Ayanapa, and actually Turkey's leadership was also invited, and I was really, really deeply hoping that they will accept it somehow, some miracle way, and I would like to see it because it's a cooperation in my eyes, and it's always good. However, as I kind of expected, they didn't attend there. There was even Syria's new regime, and maybe some other non-EU countries, and every other EU countries were there. I haven't found time to follow up what happened, what they have talked. What do you guys think if the Turkish leadership attend there? Like, what would have happened? Do you think it will be more beneficial for Cyprus problem, or it will be just like the rhetorics will be repeated and then they will take the plane and then go again,
I think I'm just going to be directly intervening on this topic. The reason why I intervene directly is because of the position of the Ursula von der Leyen, for an example. Like, they are the one who is running this green line regulations, but they're also the ones who are not passing through to other side. Therefore, today, for an example, I saw a statement from Kemal Baykallı, who is a board member of one of the pro-federationist party in the northern part. He told that you are making actions which is against to any kind of solution, because you are not even passing through the north and talk with the new president who is also supporting a federation. Therefore, if Ursula von der Leyen cannot do this, we cannot accept Turkey to go to a country where they do not recognize and try to get engaged with this kind of politics. And what I think and what I saw, indeed, there were two important topics that they were discussing on the South Cyprus. On the other hand, if you are speaking this kind of topics without Turkey, I do believe that it means nothing. Because Turkey is one of the most important geopolitical actors in the Middle East. And for an example, indeed, you said that the Syrian leader was there, and I think from the Gulf, there was lots of countries. Also, the Ukrainian leader was there, even though they're not a member of the European Union. I didn't mean for Zelensky, but I meant for the Gulf leaders and the Syrian leader. Donald Trump is always telling that the Syrian regime was changed by Turkey. So we are talking about that kind of important actor which was not in the Cyprus. Therefore, even though there was outcomes, which is about the security and also energy corridors, I don't think that these are the ones which is going to be get applied, because it was even not an official meeting, but it was like an unofficial one, which means that the acts will not be adopted, but there was only a talks. Therefore, I wasn't expect Turkey to go there and talk about anything, because Turkey is not recognizing Cyprus. And on the other hand, the way that the Cyprus is using its power against for the Turkey and Northern Cyprus, I think clears the way the Turkey's action. But I think instead of talking this, because I think it's like a huge deadlock, because it's gonna be, how can I say this one? Because it's gonna be, we are talking from a dream kind of a way. Therefore, with having Tim here, I'm just gonna be changing. I'm just gonna be changing topic a little bit, and I want to ask Tim this question, and maybe further we can go into geopolitics in order to talk about these issues as well. So again, for reminding to the YouTube, Erhürman supports a 4 points of methodology, where he is telling that the political equality will not be subject to negotiations, the past convergences will be confirmed, the start and the ending timeline will be clear, and if the table collapses, there will be no return to status quo. What I understand from now on, Erhürman tries to make Turkey accept these points, and the rumors that I heard, Turkey indeed is going to be accept in this 6 months of period, where Erhürman is not just passing to the south, but always speaking and also trying to have a better relations with Turkey and also make them to accept. But on the other hand, it makes me to feel like he is not getting in touch with the civil society organizations or with the journalists located in the southern part of the island. Therefore, I want to ask the team about the question which Erdem somehow raised the question, but the topic has changed. What is the people is thinking about Erhürman in the south?
You know, they started with a lot of optimism, but they thought that something would happen immediately. They thought Erhürman would celebrate his election victory by having a coffee with Christodoulidis the following day. And he didn't call for, like, what was it, like 9 days? Actually, from what we heard, it was the presidential office was trying to contact him, and they said he ignored 2 of their calls or something. And then finally they had a talk like 9 days later. So there's a sense in the South that people were expecting more. And there's also a sense, I mean, this is maybe not such a popular view, but it's growing, that Tufan is just another Tatar. He's just another puppet to Turkey. And the real problem here, though, is Tufan appears to have blown their minds with his 4-point methodology, of which I think most of them agree on most points. But the backstop, no return to the status quo, 3Ds. They see that as a de facto two-state solution, which they can never accept. So when I try and calm them down and say, look, Tufan's asking for a backstop, that doesn't necessarily mean he wants a two-state solution. He just wants something to catalyze the process in a positive direction. So they say, okay, we understand. But then he's always talking about what the catch is if the Greek Cypriots vote no or walk away from the table. But they have no sense of clarity on what the catch would be if the Turkish Cypriots vote no and walk away from the table. But here's the thing. I think it's the responsibility of the Greek Cypriot government to think about that. And it seems like the Greek Cypriot government have looked at Tufan's 4 proposals and they're just ignoring them. And the reason why I think they're just ignoring them is because they believe that they can go from the top down and exert pressure on Tufan through the EU and the UN pressuring Turkey. Now, as you guys know, Antonio Guterres is going to resign on his term ends on December 31st, right? And Guterres, he seems like a guy who's devastated right now. He's watching the world fall apart. I think he wants one victory before he quits his job. So there's a sense growing in the South that Christodoulidis doesn't even need to look at Tufan's proposals or give a positive reaction, because at some point, the bigger actors, the UN, the EU, will all be pressuring Turkey and negotiations will just happen. So to answer your question, people are skeptical of Tufan and they see him as a very limited actor. And they really see Turkey as their interlocutor. That Turkey is the person that the Greek Cypriots are trying to establish a direct connection with, rather than Tufan.
Wow. I think that's kind of desperate for their part to see just Turkey as a only person to talk, because it's kind of sad. As far as I see, I don't know, personally, I didn't observe how can I say, like, I observed leadership in Turkey's position being still being two-state, unfortunately. But I don't know how it will change, or if it will change. Yeah, I don't believe EU or UN or even US will pressure Turkey on this, as you may know, about, because they're increasing their trade in terms of the weaponry and other ways. And with this recent Iran war, the Persian War with America, I think they're kind of collaborating a bit more. And I don't know if they will pressure Turkey in this exact moment. Yeah.
I think what Tim and Halef brought up is something that we haven't mentioned, which was the confidence building measures that are significantly lacking, which is probably one of the probable causes of why Greek Cypriot society feels very cynical towards the Turkish Cypriot leader. Although Tufan is not internationally recognized as the TRNC president, he is internationally recognized as the Turkish Cypriot leader, at least he's leader of the community of Turkish Cypriots, right? So we all remember when back in the day, when Akıncı was president, when Nikos Anastasiadis crossed the checkpoint, they had a coffee in Büyükhan. It was the vibe was all quite positive. Everyone was like, "Oh, this time is different." And I think Tufan really missed that opportunity to show, okay, I get that he has really difficult 6 months in his first tenure as a president or leader or whatever, but I think he lost that chance to ride with the wave with the wind of change. As Halef also mentioned, when Ursula von der Leyen and the other EU high officials came to visit Cyprus, and they visited the green line that they regulate, it is quite sad that 10 years ago with Nikos Anastasiadis, even when he had the will to cross the checkpoint, big scenes, like that was a big change. And now I think when we can't even have the simplest diplomatic moves, I think it is quite disheartening, and it makes people, both Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots, very disheartened about a potential solution. Now, for Turkey, obviously, there is I do get why Greek Cypriots feel that Turkey is the main interlocutor and Tufan is just another recycled Tatar. That's a very, I think, a natural, cynical approach to have when there's no confidence building measures taking place. There's no checkpoints being opened for the last 8 years now, and failures on the existing confidence building measures to be very lackluster, such as the Technical Committee on Culture, not Culture Heritage, just amazing. I mean, the Technical Committee on Youth, which is very underwhelming so far. I think what we need to do is to focus on answering people's, I think, traumas, especially with Greek Cypriots, with Tatar, and for Turkish Cypriots, and how we faced Tatar in the last 5 years, so that we can actually focus on meaningful change internally between Cypriots.
So I was just going back to the point, whether or not Turkey's two-state policy has changed. We see that it is changing. I think Turkey has a very dynamic policy towards Cyprus, and we see evidence of it changing, firstly, in the rhetoric. Turkey is a very direct country. When Erdogan wants to say two-state solution, he says two-state solution. Same with Hakan Fidan and the foreign ministry. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing a change in the rhetoric. They're no longer saying two-state solution. They're saying a realistic solution model must be found based on the equality of two states. And they don't necessarily, in these statements, I haven't seen based on the sovereign equality of the two states or based on the political equality, just equality. So it's constructive ambiguity there. And I think what they're doing is they're preparing a space for a potential U-turn in the future. And there are other evidences that Turkey's policy is changing. Tufan visited Ankara, and he allegedly got full support for his 4-point proposal. Now, his 4-point proposal is a proposal to essentially bring things back to a federation, because the first point is political equality. That's not a two-state solution. That's a federation. Two-state solution is sovereign equality. We've been hearing these two words for a long time now, and I think many Cypriots have internalized them and they know what they mean. So we're seeing subtle shifts in Turkey's Cyprus policy, I believe. I believe that they are preparing a space, potentially. And also, with regards to weapons trade between EU and Turkey, I don't see it accelerating at any substantial amount, because the biggest deal would be an EU-Turkey defense deal, EU-Turkey defense deal, right? UK recently signed an EU-UK defense deal. Turkey has not. Why has Turkey not? Well, if you understand how the EU works, every one of the 27 countries has a veto. So as long as Cyprus and Greece are raising their hands and saying no defense deal with Turkey, Turkey can't do anything. You'd need to structurally change the EU for Turkey to get an EU defense deal. So I think right now, the Greek Cypriots and the Greek side have been annoying Turkey enough that Turkey is considering changing policy. And I think we see a very realistic manifestation of that in the election of Tufan Erhurman, because when we look at the 2020 elections, they were a comparatively dirty set of elections. I mean, Mina Atla produced the report, Mustafa Akıncı contributed to it, and we had reports that Turkish Secret Service men were visiting Akıncı to threaten him. None of this happened to Tufan Erhurman, who is a family man as well. So I actually believe that Tufan is Turkey's candidate because he allows Ankara a greater degree of flexibility. And I think, as Erdem was saying, there's also a micro story going on. There's a story between the two sides on the island. We will see progress in the bigger picture, but first we need to see progress on the ground. That's what the UN also seems to be saying. And progress on the ground is checkpoints and CBMs. And they're not very clear about what's stalling these things. But that seems to be the story. That seems to be where the freeze is right now.
Very nice analysis, I would like to say that. I just want to point out a few things that Erdem actually said, and I want to come back to, and then I want to come back to you, Tim. Actually, no, I'll change the order. I'll first answer a little bit of you and what I think about it. I completely agree on the part that EU-Turkey arms deal will never happen. It's not just the way that EU functions. I think Nikos Christoulis has greenlit, or at least said that they're ready to talk with Turkey for the safe agreement, the joint military borrowing for EU, and further cooperation between EU and Turkey. I think Nikos Christoulis has said that, yeah, we're totally fine with it. We're ready to negotiate on stuff about Cyprus, right? And I think their Greece and Turkey relationship, most of the time when Erdogan is involved, it looks very positive. Erdogan says, oh, we're good with Athens. These are some stuff that we've seen. They're pivoting towards it, etc. Actions maybe differ. I'm not sure, because I've seen Macron actually this week, I believe, has said that if Turkey threatens Greece, then France will join Greece's side in terms of that. I've seen that explanation by Macron, or like announcement. So we'll see how EU will cooperate with Turkey. Coming back to Erdem, and he mentioned the cooperation building methods. And one of the key things that we've lost from the previous footage is we separated the cooperation methods into two categories, and I think we unanimously agreed on this, which was confidence building measures into 2 points. One, social confidence building measures that you have to do as a leadership position. It doesn't matter what community you are from. And the other one is political confidence building measures. And we've talked about how these two are very lackluster. And I just want to, for the YouTube, because people lost the footage. So when we say social building measures, Erdem has given us a great example. When Nikos Anastasiadis crossed the checkpoint and drank Cyprus coffee in Büyükhan, I think Büyükhan is the holiest places for Turkish Cypriots, not in terms of religion, but in terms of like sense of belonging. And they drank coffee together there. That was a social building measure. That's peace building, creating the atmosphere for showing that the two leaders are really good friends. Okay, we're doing politics, we're negotiating, but we're really good friends. We like to hang out with each other outside of politics, and you should be like this too. Two communities working together, having coffee together. This is peace building atmosphere. And the Christmas video they released, they were laughing at it. They were like, and Akıncı was speaking a little bit Greek, Anastasiadis was speaking a little bit Turkish. Very fun video, nice edited out, etc. Good propaganda machine. And then confidence building measures came with common electricity, common telecommunication, missing community individuals, and these are like really, really good, massive confidence building measures. And in the 6 months with Tufan, he's open to negotiations, he's open to talk about it, and him himself has said that there are 2 negotiation tables, one for the Cyprus problem and the rest is for like the cooperation stuff. That's his approach, 2 negotiation tables. I just wanted to point that out. And I think to sum up, like overall, I hope that the next elections that the Republic of Cyprus will face will trigger Nikos Christoulis to approach more to UN, approach more confidence building measures, and try to come up with a more friendly environment on the island. Because right now with Facebook bickering, and I think I will quote Erdem on this, and he said that it was boomer bickering between on Facebook. It doesn't feel like a peaceful atmosphere. Yeah, I just want to sum this up.
Which I think also ties back to the far right rhetoric, that not having these moments does feed very much a really, I don't want to say it's like, in reality can easily be broken, but like we have this very simple to buy packages that are easily digested by the public because we don't have these type of simple changes that are like, oh, look at this. We don't really have this much of a gap. We're not enemies. We're not, we should, okay, politically we have this thing going on, but come on, like this can be solved. Even as Dorik mentioned, like even a small cup of coffee back in the day, how that actually helped boost the morale of people. And we haven't really had that since, 2016, 17. And Yeah, I mean, quite lackluster our situation now. Yes, Tim, go ahead.
I'm just going to make a very small point here, and I think you're absolutely right. Over time in the Cyprus problem, there's been like a devolving of the confidence building measures to the point where now, I mean, one of Tufan's proposals that I really liked was the under 14 match. And the Greek Cypriot side rejected it out of hand. I get why they reject a lot, because they see certain things as a threat to their sovereignty. But I mean, what does a group of 14-year-old kids, how does that threaten your sovereignty? Like, you can tell them to just not play in their KKTC shirts. You can tell them to, meet in the south or something. Like, there are workarounds, but they're not even doing that. And it is kind of tragic.
I feel like as well, this is my personal take, but I feel like over the last decade or something, obviously my views on this topic has widened, perhaps, but I think the idea of recognition by implication has widened to a certain, I think it's wider than what we had growing up. I'm not sure if you guys will follow up on this, but I feel like it has come to a point where every type of anything that doesn't happen under the auspices of the UN is some sort of recognition by implication for the Republic of Cyprus to the TRNC, which I find it a bit absurd. And I don't know, I think it's a bit of again, this does fit the rhetoric, especially on Turkish Cypriot side of distrusting Greek Cypriots and vice versa. So it just repeats this weird cycle. And another interesting point that I think Doruk also mentioned with the two different types of confidence building measures, I feel like because we have really lacked on the social department, I feel like the morale is like horrible since COVID, since the pandemic. Obviously the economic issues are more pronounced, and culturally and socially we are I think we're really drained as Cypriots. That's what it feels like to me, at least. Yes, Berk.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on when you say like they expand the definition of, or let's say paranoia of North being recognized to such extent that now, I mean, like since many years, they do not accept any kind of diploma from North. But I think I remember some couple of people who actually graduated in the North, the government university, and like also studied in the South. So yeah, they don't even accept for a master's or like nothing. I think genuinely like EU needs to kind of push, or maybe UN needs to do something about what's gonna happen, and or like we need some kind of a regime change in a good way, to be not that of a paranoid. Yeah, but I think realistically, if we have a good will on the table, the negotiation table, I think it will be ease out. Because, yeah, I mean, we have seen the mixed marriage issue getting kind of softened out because they put some like requirements, like if one of her parents, born in a recognized country and such, then yes, you can get. So they kind of soften it out depending on the issue. So I believe there can be way, but it's not so certain. Yes, team.
This is quite a sad thing to realize, but I think the mixed marriage issue is just a distraction. Like, I don't think there is a solution to this issue that's independent of the solution to the Cyprus problem. When Nikos came to power, he had these, like, that winter, he gave the Turkish Cypriots 14 unilateral CBMs. One of them was very ambiguous, but it promised some kind of movement. I checked, and like a year later, they'd only given out 14 passports to mixed marriage kids, like several months or a year later. Like, I was expecting them to open the floodgates and suddenly let more mixed marriage kids have the passport, but it just doesn't happen. And it seems like this mixed marriage issue has just become a political distraction that Turkish Cypriot leaders can say nice words about, but there's no real follow through, because this is the sort of issue that gets solved at the negotiating table. I mean, for the comprehensive settlement of the Cyprus problem.
I 100% agree. Yeah, I generally think like that too. Like, we need to first solve the issue, because it really looks like they will not give any kind of like citizenship for mixed marriages, even if you're in the requirement, because there is such a long line, and if you get or not, because it also depends on the person who is looking at you. And for my luck, it was a person who, I don't want to specify or say something, but it was really discriminatory person, and she she was very rude, I will say, and there was like zero chance of me getting any kind of documentation. So yeah, it needs a bit more top-down approach, I believe. Yeah.
I guess if nobody else has anything to say, we'll start to wrap up the video here. First of all, Tim, thank you very much for joining us. This has been a phenomenal episode, and I'm really, really looking forward to it. Maybe you could do another one next week where we actually have the polls and the excitement of the elections coming up on the South. I would like to also thank Mr. Halef, Mr. Berk, and Mr. Erdem Sawyer, who joined us as well. And I want to point out a comment that we got just a few hours ago by a Turkish nationalist, or possibly just someone who's misinformed, that we are open to every single political ideology, and if you want to come and debate us or talk with us, it doesn't have to be aggressive. We are really open for any political views. You can be a unitarist, federalist. Halef is ready to go. But no. It can be a very casual talk as well. We hope to get multiple views of it. And again, thank you very much for watching. Comment your views, perspectives. We read them all of us actually, probably. And we can comment, like, subscribe, share. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. And see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Oh,
See
by
you.
the way, sorry. Just before I go, check out Plan C, check out Halef's Instagram, check out them both. They're very, very valuable individuals for the community, and I think you should read them whether you agree or not.
And also side topic as well, not also the Silingo as well. The application is going on. Also, just follow that one so you don't miss anything. Please like and comment and share and blah blah. Thank you.